Our first webinar of the year for TinyMCE, and I believe Nylas as well.
Yep. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, I have with me today Ram from Nylas, who's the developer advocate there. And we are going to try to build a full stack email editor today using TinyMCE, Nylas email API. And it's all going to be done in React. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you're ready to sort of join us and get started on this. Today's agenda, we are going to be talking about what is TinyMCE. I'll dive a little bit into that. Ram will introduce Nylas a little bit more. Then we're going to dive into today's use case, which is the email editor. And then I'm going to be walking through a whole setup and demo of TinyMCE, where we're going to change the layout to make it look a little bit more like an email compared to some previous webinars. And then Ram is going to then take what I've built so far and plug in the API to make it all work full stack and actually send an email at the end. So the final thing is we'll leave questions to the end. But of course, as I'm doing something, if you have a question and if I think it relates to that slide or that portion, happy to answer. And then in the very end, I'm going to tell you about what's coming up, at least at TinyMCE, and give Ram some time as well to talk about what's coming up with Nylas. Cool. So what is TinyMCE? It is that little component that you see right there boxed. If you've ever typed a piece of text on the internet, you've most likely typed something on TinyMCE. It is a rich JavaScript-based rich text editor component that you can basically plug and play in various different web applications. It is enterprise grade and enterprise ready, so it can be as simple as you want for your hobby project, but it can also extend all the way into like enterprise projects. We have customers from NASA to Shopify, as you can see, to Salesforce and Microsoft. So several customers out there, name dropping a few for you to know that we can scale to that level. And of course, you can either deploy TinyMCE and serve your JavaScript through a Tiny Cloud CDN, which is how we'll be deploying it today. But you can also self-host all of the JavaScript files in case you don't want to use the Tiny CDN. There are many options to do it on our site. All right. So let me hand it over to Ram.
What is Nylas? It's awesome that we're doing this together because Nylas and TinyMCE complement each other really well. So think of Nylas APIs as something that empowers developers and product teams to connect with and interact with your users' email, calendar, and contacts. So a good way to think about it is that the email or the Nylas email API enables programmable email. So we as developers or product teams can build in-app features with users' data. And we'll go through all the different steps on like how do we access the user data, what does that look like? But the way I like to think about it, or the TLDR, is email CRUD. You can create or you can send an email, you can read emails, you can update and delete emails for a user.
All right. So today's use case, the email editor. This is exactly the app that you're going to build today. Honestly, if you want to follow along on the slides, I should have posted this at the beginning of the webinar, but I've pinned that message in the chat. So feel free to download the slides and take a look at them on your own pace. Specifically in this app, most of this app is sort of built out. We're going to be focusing on this component for TinyMCE and for Nylas on this kind of send functionality and how to connect that all. All right. So with that said, let's set up TinyMCE. So I am going to send you all the GitHub repository to start out with. Actually, I'm going to send you to the very specific branch that you can start with. And I'm also going to put down a few resources over here. We have the TinyMCE React Quick Start. I also have a previous webinar, a specific timestamp that I'm pointing to, where you can set up TinyMCE in a React project. If you want to learn more about TinyMCE as an email editor solution, as well as I said, I'm going to be changing the layout for TinyMCE. So why I'm doing that, how I'm doing that, all of the toolbar configuration options, they're all over there in those resources. All right, to start us off for today, this application, once you pull it down, basically looks like this. It has a front end and a back end folder, like a typical full stack application. And then under components, there's a few different files that are probably important to pay attention to. The most important one is the send emails.jsx. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. Then another thing I wanted to call to your attention is the package.json file. In order to install TinyMCE into your React application, you actually need to pull down TinyMCE from your JSON file. So that's kind of how you kind of get started with TinyMCE. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal over here. So as you can see, I have my front end running and my back end running. It's basically npmi and then follow the scripts, npm start, and it will serve it to my local host over here, 3000. So that's how the basic app looks. This is the text area. There's not much you can do with it right now, but let's see if we can set up Tiny with it. So I'm going to open up a new thing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say npmi save tinymce react, I believe is the package. And once I do that, if I take a look, oops. Oh, whoops, I did not mean to do that. So we're going to revert my changes. I should have been in the front end folder. So let's go back. So scratch what I just did, and let's go into the front end folder. Live coding is fun, isn't it? And then within the front end folder, now I'm going to say, I see a package.json file there. So now I'm going to say npmi save at tinymce react. Cool. Sweet, I did that. And now within this folder, I should see the specific changes reflected. And as I can see, it pulled down TinyMCE. Once I do that, I can actually go into my send email component over here. And what I need to do is pull in this editor from that package. Here I have import editor from TinyMCE, oops. TinyMCE React. And I should, why did it put two of them? Cool. Autocorrect can be very interesting. Sweet. So once I have that, I've actually brought in TinyMCE editor into my application. Then what I need to do is this app, if you noticed, has a text area, and that text area is what I'm trying to replace. So let's see if I can find that text area. Found that text area. And what I want to do is, if you actually go to the getting started configuration, let's see, it gives you sort of this snippet that you can basically copy paste into your application. So I'm going to quickly do that. And I am going to so what I've done is to not expose my API key in a webinar. I've actually stored my API key in my environment file as vtinymce API key. I highly recommend doing this practice and then adding all your variables in your environment file so that you don't expose your API key as you're working on your editor. And you don't have to keep resetting your configuration in your local environment as you're testing and debugging. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to set the initial value to initial value. And then actually, I don't think I need an initial value. It can be an empty string. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this. I'm looking at all of the configuration that I have here inside my init. Most of that looks good to me. I don't think I need so much content, in my opinion. Let's see. I might just be good with maybe bringing in image and then maybe a table, a code. Kind of looks good to me. I don't think I need so many options. And then within my toolbar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about how an email looks, right? So if we go to like Gmail, for example, it has some fonts, it has some undo redo buttons, and then it has like these other configurations like email and things like that. So I'm going to try to replicate that sort of mentality here and start with something like font family. And then I'm going to bring in font size. And as you can tell, my editor knows that I've done this a bunch. Bold, italic, underline, strike through. Let's see, font color, and I think I'm good with that. I'm also going to add some aligning options. I saw some outdent and indent options over here. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some things that I imported earlier, like image, table, code, and maybe help as well. Cool. Sounds good. All of that is what's going to be in my toolbar. Now let's switch over to my sample email app, hit compose. Ooh, something is happening. This is because I didn't set.
Do you need to restart your front end
That's what
just for the environment variable to take effect?
I wonder. Let's see. NPMI. Oops. Open. All right. Let's try restarting this. So I have an sample email over here set up that I'm going to use. Let's accept all of this. This is just so that you guys don't get to see everything that's in my email. Let's try to debug this live. Editor ref not defined. Oh, I know exactly what I did. All right. So this is what happens when you don't when you're super confident about this. So in the so editor ref is something that is defined in as you get started over here. Editor def current is equal to editor, but what you have to do, pretty sure, is within your function over here. I am going to go ahead and define, I'm going to go ahead and add editor ref here somewhere. Is that a good place to do it? Actually, I could do it right here before the return. All right. And now if we load, oops. Wow, today is not the day for TinyMCE to load, is it? All right, let's try to debug this very quickly. If not, I might have to end up looking at the documentation. I might have not imported useref. There we go. I didn't. There we go. So the steps to
Nice.
do this again is import useref, import the editor. I missed one small step. Set your editor ref as useref of null, and then you can set up your editor over here. Still the same configurations, just missed one tiny step, but all good there. All right. So we're all set up, but that's not exactly how our email looks, right? Let's go back to this email that I had opened up. The toolbar is actually in the bottom. There's not much of a menu bar thing going on. And, I couldn't really want to know about word count and all of the other things. So how do I fix that? So in order to fix that, what I can do is, and one more thing actually I wanted to point out here is this configuration. You can actually see this is like a smaller, like a toolbar within a toolbar, almost a grouping. We're going to try to implement that in the TinyMCE UI as well. All right. So let's hope this goes without too many hiccups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to a few things within this configuration. First, I'm going to say that I don't want a menu bar. Then I'm also going to say I don't want a status bar in the bottom, which is what was showing my word count and all of that. And then I'm going to move my toolbar location to the bottom. All right. So those are the first three steps I'm going to do to change the layout. Sweet. The toolbar is in the bottom now. Now, what I'm going to do is this is very cluttery, right? If I'm not typing text, I don't like, if I'm not formatting my text, I don't need all of this at once to show up. And the simplest and quickest way to do it is something called toolbar groups, I believe. Right. And I do have the link to that configuration and all the options that I'm talking about over here. So feel free to check it out in the slides. But what toolbar groups is, you can actually create different types of format groups. There's some that is already provided to you by default under TinyMCE skins and different update. So I'm actually going to use the default thing of icon format. So there's already a format icon. I'm going to go ahead and call it, like how my Copilot or Windsurf Pilot already knows what I'm going to type.
Yeah, I was going to ask which AI code editor or tool that you're using.
I am using Windsurf AI. Yeah. So it actually has a agentic AI with it as well, which is kind of cool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want all of this stuff that I have over here in here. And then I am going to, let's see, set this up and say the format group can be over here. And maybe we will use these pipes to sort of divide it up and give it some spacing and stuff like that. All right. I don't think I need that space over there. Cool. So I've set it up. I've added toolbar groups. I've added a format group. And I really hope that when I refresh, it works. All right, see, it's cleaner. You click on the format group, you have the different font sizes, bold italics, strike through, justify, outdent, indent, all of the fun stuff. All right, we have all of that. I also have my basic things like image, table, something to look at my source code. This is a rich text area. Look at my source code. I can see exactly what was typed in and the help button. All of this, by the way, you can set this up with all of our open source plugins. And this functionality that I've set up right now just comes right out of the box, right? You don't have to pay extra add-ons for it and all of that. And that's the kind of cool thing about TinyMCE. Just within a few configurations, fully functional editor up with a layout on the bottom, and I can configure it exactly how I want it for my email editor solution. All right, now let's enhance it a little bit. This is great, but what if you can do more? What if you can make lives easier for email editing? So the two plugins that I'm going to talk to you about is the enhanced code editor and the inline CSS docs. So I'm actually going to do this in a reverse order. I'm going to start with inline CSS. So in order to do inline CSS, what I'm going to have to do, let's see if I can. So I didn't want to spend too much time because we're already almost at the halfway mark. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find my code for the inline button. All right. Oops. All right. So first, I want to add. So what is the inline CSS? Typically, when you get content from the editor, it actually, to make the content lighter, it strips away a lot of the CSS and just kind of gives you HTML tags. This is great, but if you have an email editor, as you know, when you're sending email, you want to send it with the CSS. You can actually just enable inline CSS and know that it will work out of the box. But that's not telling too much because I haven't given you an example to see how that would work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a button here And again, just to save time, I'm doing this. What this button does is it gets the content from the editor using TinyMCE's editor API, and it copies it to the clipboard, the HTML with the inline CSS, and then I can paste it and show you that it works. In that sense, in an ideal situation, what you would do is when you do hit like a send email, or when you do want to download the templates, you can get this content with the inline CSS. All right, that it looks great to me. What I'm also thinking I might do is see if I can find. Let's see. Let's move back to the. All right, it has a copy content. What I want to do is I need a template, an initial value. So I'm gonna not prepare for this part of it. All right, so I'm gonna quickly improvise on the spot here. All right, so I have found some template here. This is a very simple template that we have at the TinyMCE website. Again, some of the images I don't fully have them, but the idea is typically if you didn't have inline CSS enabled, what would happen is if you, let's see, maybe I should do a before and after just to show you the thing for inline CSS. Let's remove it for now. Refresh. Cool. I have this, and then let's say copy HTML with inline CSS. It has some styling in there, but usually not a whole lot. And you can see that some of the core like colors and things would be missing without the inline CSS. But now when I do add inline CSS over here, what I do get, let's see, I'm gonna add this back and then copy just to show you that I'm not just faking it here. It's an empty code. This is what I copied from my header. And if you save it, that's kind of the inline CSS that you see. It's very templated. Again, you can adjust it in many different ways, and it's kind of like a great resource to be able to use. That's a quick overview of inline CSS in action. The next thing that I wanted to quickly show you was advanced code editor. Let's go back to my thing and do advanced code. So once I add advanced code, and what I'm going to do, because I do want this to be inline, I'm going to add the configuration option saying I want my advanced code inline to be true, if I can type here. And what you're going to see is this code editor previously that turn into this inline inside your HTML box. And it doesn't look that cool right now, but what if I copy pasted this stuff that I had previously here? And then I can change it to dark and light mode, increase and decrease it. This is extremely helpful for folks, who want to edit these kind of things, but from a very technical HTML standpoint, and they want absolute control over their formats, their newsletters, and so on and so forth. So this is extremely great. Then if you make way too many changes accidentally while editing, and everything looks chaotic, you click on format code and everything will get formatted. It's like auto format or prettify in Visual Studio Code. Then you can, of course, copy this code and paste it somewhere else and all of that. Just everything works sort of out of the box in a few clicks. All right. So that is inline CSS. The other few functionalities I'm going to keep a track on time that you can feel free to check out are templates and merge tags. I'm going to quickly, again, in the interest of time, show you how to set up templates in TinyMCE. Over here, let's see.
I think you're still good for time if you wanted to go through the slides. I
Yeah.
think these ones are more exciting, at least as we go through each one to go over, especially merge tags.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you're good for now.
Okay, sounds great. Since Rom says I'm good, I'm going to continue spending a little bit more time on these ones as well. So let's think about the functionality for the editor for merge tags, right? Merge tags is basically the idea of you being able to insert predefined read only tags. Also, they're also known as like personalized tokens, or in email, in the email world, I believe mail merge fields into your content. They're those things with the two sort of double braces on either end. And what it does is it really automates a lot of content creation across various use cases, including email, document generation. And you can really set it up with just a few line of code, and you can avoid so many render issues that your customers might face. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to my editor. Let's find my plugin base. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in merge tags into my options here. And then maybe I actually want to put in merge tags before my format group, right? Instead of after the format group. So those are the first two things that you have to do in order to sort of set up merge tags. Bring it into your toolbar and then bring it in. And then one more thing you do have to do is you have to set up a merge tag list. Rom and I think I took Rom's. So we put together a merge tag list for you over here that I'm going to paste. Basically, it's something that your everyday email use case might need: a first name, an email, a date, time, and then each individual might have a list of person, first name, last name, and all of that, and the person you're responding to email. And then that's standardized. So once you have that, that's the basic setup of merge tags. You can actually have it set up. And look at that. So you can say, hello, first name, thanks for the feedback. We received it at current date on current time. We'll get back to you shortly. I could make this more professional. Regards. And then maybe your own personal first name and last name. So there's different ways to use this merge tag in the email editor, but as you can see, it would standardize it for you across, just so that you avoid sending the wrong name, templatize it, and so on and so forth. And as I'm talking about something, as you can see, this could really start becoming more templatized. And that's where I would like to move on to our next plugin, which is templates. Most of you might have heard of templates in the context for TinyMCE for the longest time. They're basically these complex interactive templates that users can set, having very specific content in a TinyMCE document. And they can save the selection as a template via the same TinyMCE user face interface. Right now, I know we've received several questions about this, so I'll clarify this. We don't support template editing. So you have to like insert the template into an editor and then make the edits, and then save as a new template. But you can't just like edit the template out of the box. All right. So let's set up templates. I'm going to go over here. And in order to set up templates, I'm actually going to bring in, and as you can see, TinyMCE is very simple in the sense that, I don't know. All right, TinyMCE is simple in the sense that you can keep adding these sort of one-liner plugins for all of our pre-built plugins and just bring in their functionality without doing too much effort on your end. All right, to set up templates, add in advanced templates, and then in the toolbar, are going to add insert template for this example. And then let's see, have I set the context menu here? I have not. So over here, I'm actually going to set the context menu to advanced templates. I think it's singular. And then there's a lot of different functionality that you can actually set up for your template option. In order to get this to work, let's see. I am actually going to set up advanced templates as a sort of, it's the best way to describe it, sort of list of templates, because in an ideal sense you'd have this sort of data, this array stored in your backend, and then you'll pull from this. But for now I'm just going to call it like template data and store it right here. And then for the sake of time and visibility, I'm going to go up here and actually define what this template data looks like. Here is, I actually have a pre-built thing. So go ahead and set it up. All right. So I'm providing it with a list of templates. Let's see. And cool. I'm providing a list of templates, and it should work out of the box. Templates is a little tricky at times, but there we go. My insert
Nice.
templates shows up here, and we have a list of those templates. Basically, the setup for that list, in your backend you'll have a data store that has a title and a list of items, and you can have like these very specific templates in there. Another cool feature, if you don't want people, I guess, editing these templates or moving these templates around at some point, what you can do is we've released this new thing called only templates, which means you can actually set up this template to say locked equals true, for example. And I'm only going to do it for one so you know the difference between them. This template is now locked for editing. So you can't edit the templates. You can, of course, insert it into your application and you can edit it in your editor, but you can't edit the template itself unless you have access to the backend, while you could move and edit the other templates around. All right, that's like a quick preview of the idea of templates, meeting, merge tag, and other functionality that we have. It's a pretty great feature. I would highly recommend checking it out. And here are all the resources and documentations. Please feel free to reach out to us if you need help. And then, oops, I thought I skipped over something before. The final sort of, and I'm going to combine this with the AI assistant. The final three things that I wanted to showcase is the spell checker, the accessibility checker, and the AI assistant. I think there is a question about will we get the code in the chat. Rom, can you post the end solution for everyone? Let's move on to the spell checker for TinyMCE. As I said, most of this functionality really does come right out of the box without too much lift. So what I'm going to do for spell checker is I'm going to go back down here where I have my TinyMCE plugins list, and I'm going to add, I think it's called TinyMCE spell checker. And then I'm also, let's see, I think it makes most sense to actually add it before help. Spell check dialog. I'm just going to add one of the three different options that you can add. I believe the next sort of simple setup that helps it by default adjust this language, but sometimes I've seen if you have other configurations, it's best to set what language you want the spell check to be in. Let's refresh the or thanks for the feedback. And as you can see, it caught that. You can find the misspelling and check it out. Very straightforward implementation. We actually have other plugins that can automatically fix tiny spellings for you, pun not intended, like TEH instead of THE and so on and so forth. So feel free to check that out. We also have the accessibility checker. In order to install accessibility checker, again, pull in a plugin from your plugin options and then I'm going to add accessibility checker over here. Check. Sweet. And I think that's it. You can also set the different levels. There's different various accessibility problems that you might be trying to solve or trying to check for. The level of compliance might be different. So there's A, there's double A, there's triple A, not the batteries, the accessibility levels. And yeah, there's different HTML versions that you might be checking on. So this accessibility check supports all of that. For this purposes, I'm going to be using the default. Let's see. To do the demo, some of the biggest things that we often forget is when we have like these tables. And actually, a table is not compliant. So this could be data for customer or something. So you can actually repair this table, column repair. Okay, sweet. And then this table is actually more accessible and compliant because, as you can see, when I highlight it, they actually set this as like the header row. This is the caption for the table. So when a screen reader actually goes through this, when they tab through this, they will actually see this as a data for customer table with specific groups, and they will be able to very accurately go through, you know, whatever the data you're passing along with is. Sweet. And then our final thing that I wanted to showcase is the AI assistant, just because we're all talking about AI today. And it's important to sort of give your the capabilities to add AI to their implementation option. The quickest way to add AI to the TinyMCE editor, again, it's pretty simple. Add AI as a plugin over here. And then might not be the first thing everyone thinks about. So I'm going to add the AI dialog and AI shortcuts, which is a list of pre written prompts that we have found very useful right next to your help icon. And then finally, we need to define this AI request function. This AI request function is basically something that should be done on the server side that you connect to. For the purpose of this demo, I am going to do this on the client side. Call me slightly lazy on this, but I think it's a quick demo, so I don't want to spend too much of our demo time doing that. All right, so I'm gonna do this maybe right here. Okay, I copied this functionality right from the, let's see, right from our code in the TinyMCE docs for OpenAI ChatGPT interpretation. The only thing I might have slightly changed was instead of importing and setting the API key on the top in the documentation, I just added it directly over here. Again, same thing for this API key. I added it to my environment just so that I don't expose my API key when I'm coding and pushing it onto GitHub. Feel free to change your environment, set your environment variables in this folder over here, and then add Vite Open API key, set it to your specific Open API key, and it should work. Of course, you can adjust the temperatures and randomness settings over here, whatever tokens and whatever configurations you want. This is sort of our default recommended thing that we set up. And one more thing is you can't fetch because we're doing this on client side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring in something here. And this is basically, it's just a client side integration to be able to actually fetch from the chat completion API. So if you look at this, it's within this AI request function, and it actually makes this call to the chat completions API. So that's kind of what's happening in the backend. Nothing has really changed too much from the code that you might see on the website, except for this is a React implementation of that. All right, so if I did everything right and I remembered all the nuances, I should see an AI dialog box over here, as well as an AI shortcuts over here. Write an email for customer support. It's kind of giving me a lot. And a date and a transaction ID and so much more. All right, I can insert this. Maybe I can even take this sort of urgent subject and, I can edit it further and I can say language or something like that if it's not too formal of a customer support email. And just like that, my editor has all of the functionality that I possibly could need for a rich text editor in an email instance. If you have any more questions, feel free to really look at all of the documentations and resources we have provided, and don't hesitate to reach out. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Rom to take us from here and actually enable this send email functionality.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just really excited where I like to think of TinyMCE as the front end, really just kind of the tool where you get the email in and you get everything plugged in. And now we're going to look at the back end. So we're going to focus on the backend folder. And I think the starter code I already shared out as well. But if you want to sign up for Nylas, just so you can take a look at the dashboard, just to check out what we have there, go ahead and do that. So let me share my screen and we can just we can jump in the actual backend. So I just want to give you an overview of the backend and then what we have to do. Can you see my screen, Marina?
I don't believe so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove my screen share and try to add yours.
I
There we
think
go.
I can. Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we're going to be in the backend folder. We're going to look at a few of the sections on the backend folder. So the first thing that we want to look at is we're going to be in like two different files. So I left the README here if you want to take a look, but we're going to jump between the route and the server.js file. And as well, we'll take a look at the environment variable. So those are three different files we'll look at. As an example, just taking a look at the route.js, these are all the different function calls that we're going to look at, where let's just take get messages. This is going to retrieve all the user's messages for them. And if we go to the server file, we can see where get messages is called. So in the server.js file, we have all the routes defined at the bottom. So here we're going to use, or the front end is going to call Nylas messages, and then it's going to call the get messages function. So that's kind of the flow that we're going to look at, or we're going to jump around on the back end. We've talked about a few things, but another thing that we're going to need to look at is getting actual API keys. So we're going to look at the environment as an example of what the environment variables will be. And I'll show you where to get these on the actual dashboard. So you're going to have your API key. You're going to have to set up a region. This is optional because we support data residency. So you could define this, or you could just use our default region. And then as well, your application ID or your Nylas client ID. So let's take a look at a configuration of just using these variables. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to install the Nylas SDK. So here I've gone ahead and installed the Nylas SDK right here. So just npm I Nylas. And the Nylas SDK essentially just wraps our API and is available in different languages. So here we're going to use Node.js. That's in TypeScript. You can use our Ruby, our Python, and as well our Java SDKs as well. I just want to show you what the configuration is for setting up the Nylas SDK. So we're back in a server.js file. And if we scroll to the top, this is all that's required to set up an application or an instance of the Nylas SDK. So we just need the API key and we need the API URI. So this is just a region. And then we just call new Nylas with the Nylas config, and this will create our actual Nylas instance, and we can start using this to make calls to the Nylas API. So we've gone over the code for the Nylas API setup, and I just want to show you where you can get this information on the dashboard. So let me share my browser. So here we go. We're just going to go to I don't know if you need to add my screen again. Let's see. There we go. Okay, cool. So just going to the Nylas dashboard. In the Nylas dashboard, you're going to have to create an application. So when you create an application, there's some things you can input here in terms of the API. We're going to be using our API version 3, the application name. And this is where data residency comes into play. So for this, we're just using the United States. And to use our free tier, click on Sandbox. So you can use our free tier when you're creating the application. So I've already gone ahead and created an application. So I just want to show you what that looks like. So here at the top is going to be the client ID at the very top. And as well, if you take a look at API keys, here's where you can actually generate a new API key in the dashboard, and you can use that whenever you're calling the Nylas API. So those are the two pieces of information that you need to kind of get started with the Nylas SDK. And and now that we have this, we're not going to look at actually connecting a user just yet. I just want to show you an example of how to use this code. So let me stop sharing, go back to coding editor. Yep, there we go. Okay. So let's go down the path of, hey, if I'm a user, I'm opening up my email application and I want to read all my messages. So what needs to be done to read all your messages? The front end is going to make a call to get Nylas messages. So this is the endpoint that it's going to hit, and then it's going to call the function route.getMessages. So in the get messages call in route.js, we're grabbing some information for the user that I'll touch on in a second, but I just want to show you how simple it is to use the actual Nylas SDK. So these are 4 or 5 lines of code. So we're gonna call an async await. We're gonna do nylist.messages.list. So this is gonna use the Nylas API, the messages function, and list out all messages for the user, essentially all their messages, and it's gonna provide actually. Yeah, it's going to require using the actual identifier to identify the user. One sec, I'm just checking something. Get messages, read emails. I think it's actually read emails is the one I'm looking for. So let me take a step back there. So in server.js, we actually want to read emails, not get messages, to read all the emails into our inbox. So we're going to use the read emails function. And taking a look at the read emails function in the route.js file, we're just going to call nylist.threads.list. So we're going to get all the threads available for each of the messages, and we're going to pass it 2 pieces of information. And here we can pass in different query parameters. And this is just saying to limit the amount of threads that we receive. So for now, we're only going to get back 5 different threads, and we're going to pass in a grant for the user. And we're not going to spend too much time talking about this, and we'll provide resources to explain this further in the slides as well. Essentially, anytime a user wants to give access to their actual code, they're going to be requested permission, or they're going to have to provide permission to the application, such as the application we're using, to access their Gmail account or their Outlook account. And all this is done through auth So it's with the actual permission of the user that we get a grant. And this grant represents that permission that we use to access their actual data. So this is an example of getting all the emails in our inbox so we can display to the user. So we're just going to jump over the actual grant application part, is creating the grant, but I can show you how that's done in the browser really quickly. So we're going to go back to the browser, and in the browser, in the example application, so everything that you see on the left side is done through reading emails. And then I'm going to disconnect my account, and then I'm going to connect my email. And this is how you actually create a grant with Google, for example. So this is saying, all right, choose an account from nylas.com to continue. So I'm going to choose my email account. And now I'm going to be sent to Google, and Google is going to say, hey, this application is requesting your permissions to do these things. So this will allow Nylas, our application, to see contacts, calendars, and email. In our case, we're focused on the actual email. We can read and write or read and send emails on the user's behalf. And now we're going to go ahead and click allow. So this is essentially authenticated the user. We've received the grant, and now we can start reading emails. Just to wrap this up, the code is going to be very similar, but I'm just going to show you an example of testing this out. So I'm going to write an email. So this is going to be, hey, I'm sending this email from a webinar. And here we're going to say, hello, check this email written using the TinyMCE rich text editor. And now we could definitely make this more fancy, but for now I just want to show you the full functionality. So once you click send email, the email is going to be sent, and you can take a look that the email is received right here. So we updated the read emails, and this is the email that we just sent a few seconds ago. So this is the full end-to-end of using the Nylas API. And this is going to use similar functionality to what we shared before in terms of sending emails. And I'll show you that quickly before we wrap up. So if we go back to the server, just above the read emails, you'll see the send email functionality. And the send email functionality is going to be formatted or look very similar in the route.js file. So here we have send email. And in the send email, we're going to provide the identification for the user that's sending the email, and as well all the information for the email, including the to, the reply to, the subject, and the body. So all this information is passed from the front end to back end, and then it's sent off to Nylas to send the email on the user's behalf. And yeah, that's pretty much the walkthrough of using the Nylas API and TinyMCE together. I think a great place to check out our slides where we have a lot of links, and as well check out the Nylas dashboard to see what's going on. It'll give you a quick overview of everything, and you can take a look at a lot of the quick start guides for using the Nylas API.
Yes, absolutely. Again, Rom has included all of the resources that he talked about in the slides, and we will be posting the slides in the follow up email to the webinar, as well as it's pinned on the chat if you want to grab that very quickly. If not, it is just tinyurl.com/email webinar slides. All right. Any questions in the chat? It's a very quiet audience today. I know it's early in January, so.
So there's one question, and I think the question may be for the Nylas API, but it's asking if there's any limit on API calls we make using a free account. Only limitations from the Nylas point of view would be the limitation of your provider. So if you were using a Google email account, it would be whatever limitations they have. And I think they may have limitations on how many emails you can send per minute, but that's not something that Nylas controls.
Yes. Any other questions? You're welcome, Hannah and Harsh. Let's see. I'm going to try to show this link on the stage so everyone has that. Once again, if you want the end solution, basically check out this specific branch in the GitHub repository, and you should find the end complete full stack solution to build an email editor with React at TinyMCE and Nylas. We really enjoyed having you on and hope to see you again. Happy coding, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you.